Offsets it a little bit to the left. 11 yards shy of the record. Williams breaks the hole. Williams, hello, record book. Ricky Williams runs to the Hall of Fame. Touchback. Ricky Williams, touchdown.
Young from the shotgun. Back to throw. Stance look. Under pressure. He'll tuck it in one. Vince to the 5. Young. Touchdown, Texas. Touchdown, Vince Young. He's done it again. Vince Young has given the Longhorns the lead with 19 seconds to play in the game.
Longhorn Nation, we're back.
Hello and welcome into another edition of the the Lone Star Lowdown podcast. My name is Matt Galatzan and I will be your host. And today I'm joined, as always, by my co-host and colleague over at Texas Longhorns on SI, Zach Dimmitt. Zach, how was your weekend?
It was a good weekend. Some interesting news to go over, so we'll talk about that and see how it goes.
Yeah, some kind of unexpected stuff happened over the weekend in terms of the Texas football team. Getting a new transfer QB wasn't exactly on my bingo card when we were talking about transfers that this team needed to add to the roster. We talked at length about defensive tackles and wide receivers and tight ends and all the different, and they brought in all of those things. But then, over the weekend, they land a new transfer QB. He comes by way of Troy, and I'll let you get into his bio and his background and things like that. But tell us a little bit about this new transfer QB and what he's going to bring to Texas in terms of experience and whatnot.
Yeah, Matthew Caldwell, transfer from Troy. This is going to be his fourth stop. Fifth-year guy. He started off at Jacksonville State, and then played 2 seasons at Gardner-Webb. So kind of a lower end on the talent that he's faced. But I think that Steve Sarkisian bringing him in says a lot about what they see in him. Sark is obviously a quarterback guru. And that's kind of the thing that made this addition a little bit surprising, is that you always think that, okay, Sark recruits his quarterbacks. He doesn't really go to the transfer portal too much. And he trusts his guys in the long term. He trusts Trey Owens and KJ Lacey in the long term as quarterbacks. But I think that they understand that those two guys are pretty inexperienced behind Arch Manning. And so they need to bring in a veteran that's going to be a backup next year. And then Caldwell can do that. And I know we'll get into that in a second. But he's from Auburn, Alabama. It's going to be a step up in competition for him for sure once he does see the field. But the goal is that hopefully he doesn't see the field unless it's in mop up duty when it's a blowout. While Arch is playing, Caldwell will ideally be on the sidelines offering some of that veteran experience to guys like KJ Lacey, Trey Owens, and stuff like that. But he made 6 starts last season and started the last 5 games of the year for Troy. Just quick little stats. He completed 141 of 223 passes for 1,600 yards, 13 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and then 5 rushing touchdowns on the ground. So not too bad there when it comes to his rushing production. And that was the most rushing touchdowns in a single season by a Troy quarterback since 2017. So a little interesting fact there. But it definitely came out of nowhere. Didn't hear anything about any sort of visits or anything like we did for some of the other transfers that Texas has gotten this spring. So we'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I don't think that Texas brought him in just to be, the third string quarterback. I think he's going to be the backup to Arch, barring something crazy from Trey Owens, showing himself worthy of being that backup, come fall time. But I think maybe they made this move after seeing what KJ Lacey and Trey Owens did during the spring, seeing, okay, they're still talented guys, but they still have a little bit of ways to go. So now we're going to bring in this transfer guy to back up Arch and be that presence in the locker room. So definitely interesting and excited to see how that plays out.
Yeah, it's I think it's a smart move, a savvy move by Steve Sarkisian, because the last thing you want with a guy like Arch, obviously being so mobile and he's going to rely on his leg. He's not going to be, they're not going to overemphasize the QB run game or anything like that with Arch. But, that's a part of his game. He's going to take hits because he's going to run the ball. He's a young guy, so maybe he'll take some hits that he doesn't need to take as well. There's a potential for injury there, which you always need to be prepared for. Trey Owens, no meaningful college experience so far. He spent all of last season as a third string backup, played a little bit of mop up duty here and there, but no meaningful game reps. Obviously, KJ Lacey, true freshman, no meaningful game reps there either. So you want to be able to bring a guy in who has been thrown into the fire already. Obviously, Gardner Webb and Jacksonville State and Troy aren't exactly, the swamp in November when the bullets are flying, or it's not between the hedges like they're going to face later this year. But it's something. It's a guy who has experience, who knows how to carry himself as a quarterback, who knows how to work. And look, I also believe that they have brought him in with the intention of him being the true backup quarterback, barring in case of an arch injury. But I think that they're going to make it a competition, just like they make everything a competition. I think Trey Owens will have his chance, especially to compete for that role and earn it. But I do think that Caldwell is probably going to have the leg up here. I want to get your thoughts on this too, Zach, but I don't think this has in any sort of negative connotation towards Trey Owens or KJ Lacey, which you kind of briefly mentioned a minute ago. But they like these guys. They wouldn't have signed these guys if they didn't like these guys. Trey Owens has a cannon for an arm. He's a big guy, all the physical tools in the world to be an excellent quarterback at the college level. KJ Lacey's Mr. Mr. Football in the state of Alabama, hyper productive college career, a little bit undersized, but can sling it all around the yard, super accurate, athletic. So both these guys have everything you want in a quarterback. It's just, the one factor that they're missing is that experience. That's kind of what Sark is getting at here by bringing in Matthew Caldwell. Zach, give me your thoughts on that and what you think about this decision, because it's certainly interesting. This is the last thing that I saw coming, to be totally fair.
Yeah, and like I said, you gotta let the process play out when it comes to quarterbacks. And Steve Sarkisian, he trusts who he's recruiting. Him and AJ Milwee, they see the long-term potential with these guys, even if they're not going to play right away. Obviously they didn't offer any of their quarterbacks in 2023 except for Arch, and so they know who they're looking for. And so they see a future here for KJ Lacey and Trey Owens still. But it definitely does, Matthew Caldwell, he's not going to be the long-term answer, obviously, at Texas, but, it makes it interesting for next season. If Arch is still around, what the quarterback room will look like with Dia Bell coming in as well. You got Dia Bell, KJ Lacey, Trey Owens. You got to imagine that one of those guys may want to transfer. Trey Owens will be going into his third year by next season, or by the 2026 season. And it'd be props to him if he wants to sit another year behind Arch. But personally, I don't think anyone would blame him if he wants to, explore other opportunities. So he's, it has nothing. Them bringing Caldwell in has nothing to do with Trey Owens or KJ Lacey's ability. Steve Sarkisian even talked at length at the end of spring practice about how those two and Arch have always been really good this spring when it comes to scrimmage reps. That's when they bring it, is when it's live game action. So it says a lot about the improvement that those two young guys have made just during spring, and it's not their fault. They just don't have the experience. You can't magically come up with 5 years of experience. And I know Caldwell hasn't played tons of games, but he's been going to practices for 5 seasons, studying film for 5 seasons at the college level, and so it's hard to pass that up. But really, it'll be interesting to see what happens come next offseason when it comes with the quarterback room. Obviously they're going to always be Texas is always going to be bringing in new quarterback recruits. They want to keep that talent, really strong in that room. And I do think that if somehow Trey Owens comes out of nowhere and beats Caldwell out for the backup quarterback spot, that's just even better for Steve Sarkisian and the coaching staff, because now they have a stronger two quarterbacks right behind Arch. So I don't think they'd complain about that at all. But yeah, Caldwell's coming in to be the backup, and I don't see it being any other way.
Yeah, and this kind of reminds me of what Ole Miss did a year ago, obviously to a lesser extent because they did it with two starting quarterbacks. But they had Jackson Dart coming into his junior season in 23. I think this was in 23. It might have been last year, but it was within the last year or two. And then they brought in Spencer Sanders out of nowhere. They just signed a 5-year starting quarterback from Oklahoma State for absolutely, from absolutely out of nowhere, as kind of to to give them some veteran presence behind them, but also it was kind of a tool to motivate Jackson Dart and make him that much better, and sort of drive him to sort of take hold of that starting quarterback job and improve. And I think that there might be a little bit of that here too with bringing in Caldwell, just to like bring in a little bit more competition, keep these guys on their toes a little bit, drive them to compete and get better. Because the last thing that Trey Owens wants to do is lose the starting or the backup job to a new transfer. So I think he's going to be a little bit more motivated. And this Caldwell's going to be there, and if one of these guys slips up, then he'll have an opportunity to move up as well. But just the more good quarterbacks you bring in, the better the competition is, the better position room is. And I think that Texas is going to have that continuously going forward, like you mentioned, through 2026, and then eventually in 2027, 2028. Like there's just going to be good quarterbacks coming through this program constantly because of Steve Sarkisian, and the competition is going to make it that much better year after year. So I'm a fan of this move. I just didn't see it coming. Another move that I did not see coming this weekend was Texas landed a commitment from the 2026 class, a 5-star recruit. And if you're not watching this on YouTube or one of our live streams, I'm doing a air quotes mark because 5-star. Texas lands a long snapper. Key position.
Yep.
One that's not talked about very, very often, but it is a key part of the special teams unit. If you have an unreliable long snapper, it can spell disaster. Snap it over the punter's head, low snap on a field goal, things like that. It's there's these positions in football that don't get a lot of shine. Long snapper is one of them. Holder on a field goal is one of them. But Texas brought in one of the best high school long snappers in the country, gets a commitment. He'll be here next spring. But Zach, tell us a little bit about this long snapper and where he sits.
Yeah, Trot O'Neill, 5-star long snapper. The rankings for special teams positions are done a little bit differently sometimes. So a lot of times these long snapper guys, they're typically unranked by the primary recruiting sites, but Cole's Kicking, they do a pretty good job over there of ranking all those specialists when it comes to kicking, punting, and long snapping. And so, but Texas, Lance St. Louis, he's been the long snapper now for multiple seasons. He's going to be out the door by next offseason because it's his final year of eligibility. So they need to find a guy that can continue to carry the reins moving forward. I think it says a lot about St. Louis, what he's done during his time here, because we haven't really talked about him. We'd be talking about him a lot if he was messing up all these snaps and wasn't getting into the holder or anything. It would be a topic of conversation for years. But he's done a good job, and you see that by no one talking about it. So and it's pretty good on his part. But we saw the kicking problems at the end of last year with Bert Auburn, and obviously you see Texas trying to look to solve that with the addition of Texas State kicker Mason Shipley. But you don't want to then have an issue where you can't even kick the ball if the long snapper is not getting it to the holder. So,
right.
I think O'Neill he'll play a role in 2026. But for now, I think they have their guy still with St. Louis, being a veteran. at that position, and then O'Neal can come in. But obviously, not too much to talk about when it comes to a long snapper, but definitely notable for sure, because you want to see Jeff Banks have the strongest special teams unit in the country, and this definitely helps the operation run a little bit smoothly, hopefully, for the future.
Yeah, and like we said, it's hard to evaluate these guys for the normal or the big recruiting services on 24/7, Rivals.com, all those, even ESPN. They're just scouting so many people, so that, like, these position groups kind of get kind of pushed under the rug a little bit. But Cole's kicking camps does a great job of doing it, like you said. Here's their scouting report real quick for O'Neal. They say O'Neal is easily one of the most exciting prospects in the 2026 class. He has an impressive size and uses it extremely well in his snapping motion. O'Neal attended the 2024 Cole's Spring Texas Showcase and finished with the third highest overall charting score in the country. At the 2025 Cole's Underclassmen Challenge, he showed the same great consistency with his accuracy and ball rotation, and we have grown as we've grown accustomed to. O'Neal has the snapping talent and physical attributes every coach is looking for in their starting long snapper. And he is out of Prestonwood Christian Academy. So, yeah, I mean, good stuff. My brother was a long snapper in high school, so I'm sure he's thrilled about this one. He loves a good long snapper, but under the radar move for Texas, could pay dividends in the long run. You want every single part of your program to be elite, even down to the less heralded positions like long snapper. So good move for Texas there. Okay, let's move on now to the real reason why we're here, and the real reason why I'm always on podcasts, it feels like these days, and it's to bang my fist on the table for Quinn Ewers. I was shocked that he went as the last quarterback in the draft, and I thought it was criminal. I thought it was terrible. I thought it was cowardly by the NFL to have him go and drop that far. And we had our theories. We talked about it last week a little bit. There was a couple of things we kicked around. Was his name too big to be on a roster as a backup quarterback? That was one of the big things that we talked about, right? Once you get to a certain point, if you're the, who are some teams? Let's go through some teams who took some quarterbacks ahead of them. The Raiders, they got Geno Smith. The Eagles, they get Kyle McCord. A couple teams like that are picking their backup quarterbacks with the idea that they are backup quarterbacks, right? They don't want, and this isn't going to happen with Jalen Hurts, for example, because he just won a Super Bowl, obviously. But in the case of the Raiders, let's go with the Raiders, for example. If Geno Smith comes out and has a bad game, and Quinn Ewers is your backup, your fans are going to be clamoring for Quinn Ewers, and then the media is going to start talking, and then there's going to be a distraction in the media about should the new rookie quarterback come in and should the Raiders make a change, and that's just stuff that the NFL, especially a first year coach like Pete Carroll, you don't want to have to deal with stuff like that. And Geno Smith is a good quarterback. He's a bridge quarterback, but he's a good quarterback. Those are just some of the things that can happen in the NFL if you have a backup quarterback with a big name. The Cleveland Browns are probably going to run into that at some point with Shedeur Sanders as soon as, I don't even know who the hell their starting quarterback is going to be right now. I guess Joe Flacco, maybe Kenny Pickett. But as soon as one of those guys struggles, they're going to be banging their hand on the table for Shedeur, and there's going to be a distraction in Cleveland, and it's going to turn into a mess. So recently, Todd Archer came out with an exclusive interview with Quinn Ewers and his entire camp. His agent was involved. His family was in there. And, we're not going to go through the whole thing, but one of the things that came out was that Quinn's agent has a quote in here where he basically takes the NFL to task and I'll pull it up here real quick. Give me 1 second here. I thought I had this pulled up. Okay, so basically what happened was his agent, Robert Slavin, was talking to – they had a few teams in mind as the draft was going on. It gets to day 2, and they think, okay, if the Cleveland Browns pick Tyler Shuck at number 33, then Quinn is in play at number 40, right? And then if Jalen Milroe goes to the Raiders, then Quinn's in play for the Seahawks later on. Obviously, neither of those things happen. Quinn ends up sliding and drops, into day 3. Then, they're out there, they're talking to other teams. Quinn ends up sliding all the way down the board. As a result, goes to number 231 in round 7. Here's what his agent had to say about that process. He talked to about half the league, and he said they thought he was a 3rd or 4th round pick, but he was too big of a name to be a clipboard holder, which I think is chicken shit. I totally agree. I think that that's ridiculous that you would pass on a quarterback because he is too big of a name to be a clipboard holder. The idea of the NFL is that it's supposed to foster competition, and you're supposed to be a competitive, organization, and you're supposed to push your players to be the best they can be. If you don't bring in the best possible players to breed that competition, then what the hell are you doing in the first place? Look at what Brock Purdy has done in the NFL as Mr. Irrelevant. He comes in and he goes to San Francisco and he leads them to Super Bowl appearances. And they had another quarterback on the roster in Trey Lance, and he was beat out by Brock Purdy because he was motivated to do so. I mean, I don't think there's any excuse for any of this. I think it is chicken shit. I think his agent's absolutely right. I'm kind of rambling now at this point, Zach, because I'm a little bit worked up. Why don't you give me your thoughts on this, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I don't think that some of these teams that took a quarterback in the 6th and 7th round were taking the best available quarterback. I think it just became clear once you see Cam Miller from North Dakota State. All credit to him. He got drafted in the NFL. He really deserves it. I have a hard time believing that these teams truly believe that Cam Miller is better than Quinn Ewers. And we'll see. You never know how these things go in the NFL. But, Graham Mertz to the Texans in the 6th round. Miller, like I mentioned, Curtis Rourke, who's just coming off that torn ACL. He played on Indiana. Obviously I'm sure a lot of teams saw that his resilience being able to play injured, but still doesn't put him over Quinn Ewers, in my opinion. So I think, that excuse about the clipboard holding is a little bit silly. It doesn't seem like I believe that teams told him that, Ewers' agent, but it just seems like kind of a lame excuse as to why you'd pass on a guy that was probably the best available quarterback once you got into the 6th and 7th round. I just have a hard time believing that these teams really felt that, Riley Leonard, Graham Mertz, Cam Miller, Curtis Rourke were better than Ewers. It's like we had talked about previously. Maybe they didn't do as much of an evaluation on him, thinking that he wouldn't fall this late. And so it gets to that point where you see him on the board and you're like, well, we evaluated these guys a little bit more, let's just go with our guy. And so, guys like Kyle McCord, Will Howard that went in the 6th round, I have no problem with people feeling like maybe they were more deserving over Quinn. That's fine if you feel that way, whatever. But yeah, I totally get it if you feel differently. But when it comes to the point where it gets silly when the 4 names I mentioned are getting selected over him, that was just a little bit ridiculous. And so, I don't know if I like that excuse by the NFL teams. It just seems like maybe the evaluation wasn't done as thoroughly as many had hoped. And so, let's be honest, Quinn Ewers is not a 7th round quarterback. No one expected him to be a 1st round pick or anything this year. That obviously wasn't going to be the case. But just the fact that he almost went undrafted was just, like you said, it was almost criminal. So, we'll see what happens there. But I think that he and his camp have a right to be a little bit frustrated, but nothing you can do about it now. I think he's landed in the best possible situation for him, because I think that it would be surprising if he gets a few reps next season as a rookie. When that happens, it remains to be seen. But it's not like he's going to a team with an established quarterback like Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson. He's not going to be sitting behind an established starter. I mean, I know Tua is an established starter, but as we've seen, injuries have been a big issue, and so it's hard to imagine him playing all 17 games. And Zach Wilson's the backup. You never know what could happen with him. So I think that it's a good situation for Quinn to prove everyone wrong. Nothing you can do about it now. 7th round, it was what it was, but now it's time to, show everyone like every other player that's been overlooked in years past. Now it's time to show why these teams shouldn't have passed on you.
Yeah, and like I said, Brock Purdy is a perfect example of that, going from Mr. Irrelevant to a guy who's about to earn a $50 million contract, more than likely, from the 49ers. So, I think Quinn has this in him, and he had some comments recently in the same article about how the slide affected him, and in many cases like this could be a super disheartening thing, right? If you're going into the NFL draft as, you've been the number one quarterback in the country your whole life, you were thought of as a Heisman Trophy contender going into your final year in college, expecting to be a day 1, day 2 pick before your final season. You struggle a little bit. You hear a lot of outside noise about how you should be benched in favor of a guy who's never started a game before this year. There's all these external factors already before the NFL draft. And then you get to the NFL draft and you slide all the way to the bottom and you're the last player picked at your position. It would be really easy for him to say, man, this sucks, and kind of, go into a hole and have some, some doubts about himself, right? But Quinn's always been super resilient. He proved that throughout his entire career at Texas. And I love some of these quotes that he gave to Todd Archer about that. He says that basically he's using this as motivation, right? Which you love to see. He says it's definitely a lot of motivation that comes with it, especially being the last quarterback drafted. I still have high expectations for myself, but from the outside looking in, this is the first time in my life to not have much expectation. There's definitely motivation and fuel, a lot of it. And, I think that that's an awesome way to look at it, because now, for the first time in his life, really, or first time in his football life, I should say, he's not going to be the center of attention, the number one guy, the guy that all the expectations are falling on to be the leader and the champion and all that stuff. He just gets to come in and work and prove himself. So, I'm very confident he's going to be able to do that. I believe in this kid a lot, and we'll get into a couple other things he said too. But Zach, what are your thoughts on his motivation?
Yeah, I think that sounds about right when it comes to Quinn. We've seen at Texas, he's a stone cold killer sometimes. I mean, this guy, nothing has fazed him on the biggest stage. Being the quarterback at Texas is already one thing when it comes to the spotlight, but then being the starting quarterback at Texas, whenever you're leading your team to back-to-back semifinal appearances, is a different thing. He's been on the bright lights with a big brand on his helmet, and he's never seemed rattled at all. And so I don't think that a third string job in the NFL will have him too phased. It's going to take time to learn and adjust to the speed. But I mean, this guy just played in the SEC last year and against high level competition during his college career. So I think he'll be able to catch up to speed. And it's not going to phase him as a rookie, in my opinion. One of the reasons that we're so high on Quinn is because, the resume that he built at Texas, and a lot of these other quarterbacks, in my opinion, my strong opinion, they can't compare to the postseason resume that he was able to build. Obviously, Will Howard won a national championship; he's probably the exception, but Riley Leonard played in a national title game. But Quinn Ewers went to back-to-back CFPs. No other team did that this year other than Texas, and so it's not like he was producing at a group of five school with no one really watching, but then burst onto the scene in the NFL. It's going to be hard to imagine that he's that doesn't do well over his first couple of seasons just because he's been through that adversity. He's seen the bright lights, and so that motivation sounds about right to me. I think he's going to use it as fire for sure, and yeah, so he may not see any time as a rookie. It all depends on who what happens in front of him. But I think that once he does see the field, people in the Dolphins organization, Dolphins fans, they'll be pleasantly surprised with what he's able to produce, especially when he's got some talented weapons around him. So,
yeah, and he's also battled through injury, and he the conference title appearances as well. Like this kid's really done everything, which sort of like I understand it. He's not a perfect quarterback. Neither of us are sitting here saying he's a perfect quarterback. He has things to work on, just like everybody else has things to work on. But he got passed on, and he's going to have a chance to prove people wrong. And my favorite quote that I think he said in the entire story with Archer, and it was a quick one, but he said, the Raiders took two FCS guys above me, so we'll see what happens. So like it kind of hints that he's like, I saw what happened in front of me. And it's not, I don't know if it's going to be the Amon-Ra St. Brown thing where he like has a list of all the teams that passed on him, but he saw that and he realizes that. So he's going to go out and he's going to try to do his thing to make the Raiders probably look like idiots in a couple of these other teams.
Yeah, I love Pete Carroll, and he's always done a good job. I covered the Seahawks for a few years back in the day, and he's always done a good job drafting and everything. He always tries to go for some of those like smaller name guys, the smaller schools, but I don't understand the Raiders and Pete Carroll with the FCS selections. Quinn could have easily been the backup option. We were looking at Vegas as a potential option the whole time, kind of not really looking at Miami. So, yeah, I don't agree with that either. And that definitely caught Quinn's eye for sure.
Yeah, and then the last thing we'll get into here is going off of that too, is there's going to be a whole lot of questions now with Quinn being the last quarterback taken. Like, should he have gone back to school for another year, entered the transfer portal, whatever the case may be, gone to another school? I think On3 came out with an article about that. Like, did Quinn make a mistake entering the NFL draft? And there's been a lot of conversation about it around as well. I'll let you give your take on it first, I guess, and then I'll go next. Because I mean, I think we're probably both on the same page here. But I want to get your take on whether or not you think he should have come back to school or entered the transfer portal and spent one more year in college before heading to the NFL draft.
I think that in hindsight, if he would have, known that he was going to be bordering on going undrafted, I think that he probably would have transferred. But that's what made it so surprising, is that no one expected him to be almost undrafted. So, I'm not sure. I don't have any intel on that or anything. But, in my opinion, I think that if you have a fear of going undrafted and that these teams are really overlooking you, why wouldn't you go back to school for another year? In my opinion, if he had chosen to transfer, wouldn't have tarnished his legacy at Texas. That's just my opinion. Other people may feel very different. I totally understand. But people were kind of pushing him out, and so it wouldn't be too upsetting for certain Texas fans to see him go and see Arch come in. It kind of was the natural thing everyone saw coming, that Arch isn't going to wait around another year, so something's got to give. And I just think that him transferring, he would have been able to make a lot of money elsewhere. Still would have made money in Texas, but probably then would have been in a quarterback battle. And I don't think he was going to want to. I know he loves Arch. He's spoken highly about him, but I don't think he's going to want to do that. And so it kind of was interesting too. His agent talked about it with Archer in that interview. He didn't really mention these two teams as surefire potential landing spots for Ewers if he chose to enter the portal. But he said, talking about that topic of Quinn potentially entering the portal, he said when they beat Arizona State on January 1st, the next game was January 10th. If he was going to commit to Miami or Notre Dame, he's going to do that while his team's got a playoff game in a week, and his teammates are going to look at him like, you're going to another school if you lose, you can't do that. So it's kind of interesting that he pointed out Miami and Notre Dame as two hypotheticals, but I don't think he would have thrown those two teams into that comment if they weren't potentially in the mix for Ewers had he entered the portal. Obviously, we never really saw that come to fruition, but it's possible that those two teams were in the mix for him had he chosen to transfer. But obviously he ends up going to Miami anyways with the Dolphins. So pretty interesting comments there. But I'm kind of rambling, but I think I think he probably should have entered the portal if he knew going in that he was going to be bordering on going undrafted, because obviously no one expected that.
Yeah, and I can see that side of the argument. I don't think that he. Okay, so I think that if, as his agent had pointed out in this interview as well, had Shuck gone to the Browns at 33, then Milroe goes earlier as well. I think that completely changes the landscape of this conversation. And then at that point, Quinn is a second or third round pick, and we're not even questioning it, right? It's just an unfortunate series of events that led Quinn to being pushed down to the 7th round, which could happen to anybody. It just with quarterbacks, it's so much more of a finite position group. Like you're not putting 3 quarterbacks out on the field like you're putting 3 wide receivers or 3 corners, and like there's not reps being split up like there is between 2 or 3 running backs. So if you're not sure that a guy is going to come in and be your starter immediately, then his value decreases exponentially and he gets pushed down very quickly. So the fact that Quinn missed out on those couple of spots early in the 2nd round, that's really what pushed him down. And that's why his agent called it chicken shit, obviously, because these teams didn't want a starting caliber quarterback. They were looking for a guy who was going to be a backup, or starting name quarterback rather. And they weren't looking for a guy who had a big name attached to him. So in that kind of a scenario, it's kind of hard to blame Quinn for making this decision regardless. At the end of the day, though, I don't think he cares, like in terms of like whether or not he was picked in the he cares. Like he's not – I don't think you could have told him you're going to be Mr. Irrelevant or you're going to be the first pick in the NFL draft. I still think he would have gone to the NFL draft. Like, I don't think there was any in between there. I think he wanted to live his NFL dream. The Ewers family is not hurting for money in any sort of sense. So I think a $4 million NIL deal was not necessarily going to sway him from living out his dream, where he'll make we have his contract details and a story on Texas Longhorns on his side. I don't have them pulled up in front of me, but he's going to make fine money in his rookie season, and he'll have a chance to make more down the line. He'll make money in endorsements and those kinds of things. I mean, he just has one. He just got a new one with a local awesome barbecue restaurant. He'll be fine, right? And I think at the end of the day, the reason that he didn't enter, and he mentions this in the Archer story as well. He just wanted his legacy to be as a Texas Longhorns quarterback, and his agent says he wanted to win a national championship. He wanted to leave a legacy at Texas. Now it's supposed to be, do you want to talk about going to another school, or to be able to flip your mind like that? Plus the schools need an answer on January 1st. Like, he just wanted he wanted to end his career as a Longhorn. He wanted to live his dream in the NFL. So whether or not he went in the top 10 or is Mr. Relevant, I don't think he made a mistake, because, the guy just wants to live his life and live his dream. And I'm happy for him. He's just going to be that much more motivated to prove people wrong. Was it easy for him to watch his name slip? No, but it could potentially end up being a good thing for him based on where he landed, and the coaching that he has, the scheme that he's in, and the motivation factors and all those things combined to it. I think it's going to end up being a really good situation for him down the line. Maybe I'm a little biased. Maybe I'm a little bit of a homer when it comes to Quinn, but I have that right, Zach.
Yeah, we're definitely a pro Quinn Ewers podcast here. So if you didn't like Quinn's past season at Texas or his time in Austin, please see the door. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, we're always
please listen.
Yeah, we're always going to speak highly of Quinn in this podcast, so that's not going to stop. But yeah, just on those contract details, 4-year deal ranging with the Dolphins, of course. 4-year deal ranging from about $4.3 million to $4.31 million to $4.33 million, according to Spot Rack. Obviously, had he entered the portal, probably could have made a lot more. Not probably, he definitely would have made a lot more if he had entered the portal and gone elsewhere. When you're factoring in not only what a school would be willing to pay him from their own NIL money, but also his partnerships he could have still been landing, had he stayed in college. So, obviously money was not the issue here. I think he kind of expected that he was probably going to make a lot less as a rookie. But yeah, I think the NFL dreams were too much to pass up on. And so now he gets to actually do it, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see what happens with him. It should be you know what? I think I'm going to buy a Quinn Ewers jersey. I think that's what I'm going to do, Zach. I'm going to get NFL Sunday ticket this year. I'm going to watch every Dolphins game. I'm going to have a Quinn Ewers jersey.
Yeah, I haven't bought Sunday ticket yet. It gets pretty annoying when they block out all the games. But yeah, I got to keep up with the Longhorns as well, and he's definitely at the top of the list. So maybe this will be the year I finally pull the trigger.
Maybe it's a tax write-off for us,
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to do it for another episode of the Lone Star Lowdown podcast. We'll be back tomorrow to talk some more Texas Longhorns sports, but you can listen to us on any major podcast platform out there, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Apple Music, Pocket Casts, and all of the above. We are also live on X, Facebook, and YouTube, and you can catch us there as well. Also, don't forget to check out Texas Longhorns on SI for all your latest news and notes regarding the Texas Longhorns. If you enjoyed the podcast here today, make sure to hit the like button and the sub button on your favorite platform. But most importantly, be sure to tell somebody you love them, and we will see you next time.
We'll be back. Yes, sir.
Fight.